And welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, and we're on the home stretch. It's now going to be just really probably maybe about 20 hours before the polling booths open in the United States, and we're doing as we promised, the kind of a live stream on the few hours before, giving our assessment, trying to speculate as to where this is going. Obviously, it's a bizarre kind of election in which really nothing moved. I mean, whatever happened, nothing seemed to move. And if you look at the polls, the final polls that have come out, they're pretty much where they were before Biden dropped out. I mean, it was before Biden dropped out. It was still pretty much neck and neck. So obviously we can draw various conclusions from that. But anyway, Peter, what are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, well, it's at looking at the last polls, and of course, George and I are very skeptical of polls. Okay. There's always have to contend with the shy Trump voter. But I mean,
your dogs seem to be quite agitated about the election. They seem very excited.
Apple, go sit down. Okay. Oh, okay. Sorry, everybody. It's his crazy hour because we're doing it for me an hour later. There's a lot of interesting data points out there. Okay, look at something. It's number one, the early voting. It's very interesting. There appears to be, and I'm going to use appear a lot. Okay, to be a significant gender gap here. Okay, and obviously the gender gap is not favoring Donald Trump, but Kamala Harris. Now, I don't know. Maybe I just kind of got lost in the shuffle in life, but I want a woman president. That's so like 1990s to me. I don't really get it. Okay, what difference does that make? But apparently, this is something that's very important for many. I'm not a woman, so I guess can't understand it. Okay. Also, excuse me. Also, Dobbs' decision is something the Republican Party kind of just left on the porch, thinking it was resolved. But that's not resolved for a lot of people. And I thought it was let the states take care of it. I mean, I think that was always what should have been done. Again, being a man, I'm not as attached to the issue. I'll be honest with you. Okay, that looks like it's weighing heavily. Independents that are being polled exit have moved towards Kamala Harris. So there's a lot of data points here. The weird poll that we talked about coming out of Iowa, really weird. And that's what I was very dismissive of it yesterday, talking with George. But with these other data points coming in now, we might be seeing a trend, or maybe it's a psyop. Okay.
Well, that's the thing. Okay. Right. Well, but that's the thing. I mean, because if the striking thing about these early voting numbers, and again, we always have to be very careful not to draw too many conclusions from the early voting numbers, but certainly that the Republicans are doing much better than they were in 2020 for early voting. That may not be that significant. It may be that, again, they're just cannibalizing their own vote. People who would have voted on election day, but they've been mobilized. You've got to come out to vote. Come out. Don't rely on the last day voting. So we don't yet know, but we do know that minorities so far are not showing up for Harris. They're looking up. It's sort of the African American vote. They're just simply not showing up for Harris. They could still show up on election day, so that could change. It's happened before where people say, well, the black vote hasn't shown up, and then the black vote does show up. But so far, the black vote has not shown up for Harris in North Carolina or in Pennsylvania. And then there's the issue of the independents. You said, I think that is being put about, or at least the late deciders. The issue of the late deciders that they're breaking for Harris, that was put out by the Harris campaign last week, that David Plouffe, who used to work for Obama, who said, oh yeah, the late breaking vote is breaking for us. And that has been repeated. And I'm not sure that
Yeah,
that's
it's not just projection, you know.
exactly.
Well, you know, but one of the interesting things is this morning going through all kinds of comments and research and polling and I try to make sense to myself, these things. I don't have a North Star. So and so says, and I just go along with it. I gave up on that in 2016, everybody. Okay, and I encourage you to do the same thing. But one interesting thing, and I don't know how to weigh it, George, but there's been a hell of a lot of early voting, like 46% or something like that. What does that really tell us? Now, I don't know, you know, early voting is, well, by definition, it's before election day. But I mean, was this a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago?
I mean, they started opening already. Yeah, it's been a while since in September. They started opening in September. Yeah.
Well, why am I bringing this up? Well, so all of the shenanigans and cringe-worthy appearances and interviews, that doesn't play into it. It's very interesting. So much of the intensity of the last phase of the election was not even taken into account by people that voted early. So I think that's really kind of interesting in itself. And we'll only know after the fact, hopefully.
But I think the early voting, first of all, I think the what's made a difference is the Republicans. The Republicans felt that they got badly burned in 2020 because
you got to learn to adjust. Yeah,
exactly. The Democrats, you know, they essentially put all these votes in the bank. You know, they just built up this huge lead going into election day. And then when you go into election day, then essentially you don't have any real options. I mean, that's it. You've run out of any road room because you either vote or you don't vote, and then that's it. So if you know you're standing in line for 6 hours, you know, some people are going to get fed up and say, I can't stand. But that, of course, again raises real questions about the American election system. And why do people have to stand for 6 hours waiting to vote? Why can't there be polling stations on every block? I mean, just so you know,
well,
stand for hours online.
Just to give a contrast or a comparison, the recent presidential election here, and I live in a new apartment complex, and there is what's called the Jetski Sad, like a preschool, kindergarten, and it's a polling station. And the complex right across the street, George, because I checked. That their jet skis up. There's a hole.
Yep. That's right. That's exactly. I think you're frozen a little bit, so I'll just continue to talk, hoping that Peter unfreezes. But that's you know, without question. So there's the people are now thinking in terms of making up for that ground. So you know, you don't get into a situation where you not only have to vote for wait for 6 hours, but then there might be all kinds of mishaps at the polling station. You know, wrong size paper, the machines don't work. Please go to another polling station. You know, that's just a few miles down the road. So people just want to avoid all of that. And so here again, you know, clearly the Republicans have learned their lesson and have put these votes in the bank. Okay, it looks like Peter has disappeared. Let's hope he reappears. And so that's obviously an important factor. But in terms of the early voting, I mean, in comparison, 2020 versus 2024, obviously the Republicans have done a lot better. And so therefore the Democrats will have, you know, by the same token, the Democrats are going to have to, you're back. Good to see you back. By the same token, the Democrats are going to have to do a lot better on Tuesday, on the actual day of the voting, to make up for the fact that they don't have such a large margin. Now, the issue of the women is a kind of an interesting one because, you know, I remember this phenomenon when Hillary Clinton was the presidential candidate, and so many women said, "Yeah, I'm voting for Hillary because she kind of reminds me of my mother." You know, and so it's a sort of feeling, oh, if I'm voting for her, I'm kind of voting for my mother. And I think there's some sense of that and particularly single women. And I keep in mind, I mean, Kamala Harris is a very odd. I mean, or at least she's not odd. She's a a modern sort of woman. She didn't marry until very late in life. She doesn't have children. Basically
Her own children.
Her own children, but even these are not really. She married Doug Emhoff when his children were already grown up. So she was never even. I mean, you can't even call her a stepmother because they were already grown up. They didn't really need any kind of mothering. So so she's like that. So she marries late in life. She doesn't have children. So in some ways, that's modern womanhood kind of identifies with her rather than used to be the old way. Oh yeah, like me, married early, have children early and so on. So she's much more of a kind of the modern type of woman. I think that I think does appeal to a certain kind of demographic.
Well, and I think you can dovetail that into the Fetterman issue. Okay, remind everyone, John Fetterman was running for Senate after he had a stroke during the campaign against Dr. Oz, a fake Republican, a fake conservative, a fake. Okay,
right.
But then you had Fetterman that I remember his opening comments on the debate. Good night. That's the first
that's a good one. Good night.
Good night. And he had to use some kind of computer interface to have an interview. Okay, he won, everyone. He won. Now, why am I bringing it up? I agree with George, but I think you can add an extra layer here. Is that, do these campaigns have really any impact whatsoever? Because if you're just voting your tribe, it's just tribal.
That's very true. Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
That's a really, really bad place to be, everyone. Okay, because then you're essentially saying you're abdicating your own self-interest, saying they'll take care of it for me. Okay,
well,
or is it just such visceral hatred that you again abdicate your own self-interest to the guy that's against the Hitler or the devil and all that. Right. That's a very that's a very political culture.
Well, that's right, and it's a very much a part of America. I mean, it's basically you have a 50-50 split, and that means there isn't really that much movement as between either side. Obviously, you had in the past you had some movement. I mean, like Obama came along, he seemed nowhere. People who had voted for Republican thought that, hey, this would be great. I mean, this is a black man. He's very different from the kind of black politicians that we're familiar with, the sort of Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton. He transcends race. That was, of course, bogus, but nonetheless, he was able to win over, voters who had traditionally voted for the Republicans. And then, even like Bill Clinton in 1992, basically you'd had 12 years of was it 12? Yeah, that's right. They had 12 years of Republican rule, and so people, there were Republicans saying, "Well, it's time to give the Democrats a chance." And so Bill Clinton came along. Yeah, hey, I'm a new Democrat, third way. I'm not an extremist. I'm no George McGovern. And so Republicans voted for Bill Clinton. You don't have that now. I mean, you just have basically, I think, as you say, you have the tribes. The Dobbs thing is a very interesting issue because whichever way you think. I mean, abortion is not anything that either Trump or Harris is going to be able to do anything about. I mean, there's just nothing they're going to be able to do anything about because let's say President Harris say, oh, well, I'm going to make Roe v. Wade the law of the land. Well, Roe v. Wade had this whole 3-trimester scheme, which means that Roe v. Wade actually had quite serious restrictions on abortion within the second and very strict restrictions within the third trimester. There is no way the Democrats are ever going to agree on imposing any kind of restrictions on abortion. So there's no way the Democrats will agree on passing such legislation.
And on top of it, George, you're absolutely right. Why would they want to resolve it? It's a wedge issue. That's always a wedge. Why resolve it when it's the gift that keeps on giving?
Right.
Okay. politics. Okay, that's what you fall back on. Okay, another thought. I'm looking at, you know, in about a day or so, everyone, a day and a half, we're going to find out what 2016 was all about. Okay, because was it a fluke? Maybe it was. You know, the Democrats were asleep at the switch. Yeah. They ran an awful candidate. Okay, but I'm loath to quote the man or paraphrase Michael Moore, which I think has just gone completely off the rails over the last 10 years. But he noticed the rage in Middle America in 2016. Right. He got it right.
Right.
Well, 72% of the electorate thinks the country's on the wrong track. Right. So you're still going to vote for your tribe. See, that's right. And then again with 2016, then think about 2020 was a wash for many reasons. But how is our politics? What is the foundation of it? I mean, if 72% of people think you're on the wrong track, are you going to still vote for the same guys? I mean,
right? No, I agree, but at the same time, that those polls, 72% are on the wrong track. That's what leads me to think that Trump is going to pull this off. It makes no sense that if 72% of the public thinks that the country is on the wrong track, they would stick with essentially the incumbency, which is what Harris is. It's the incumbency.
Yeah, except for
that just doesn't make sense, and that's why I'm still thinking that Trump will pull this off. Not by a huge margin, but he will pull this off.
Your argumentation is flawless, except for it's Trump.
No, I agree. Well, that's why that's why I think it'll be a small margin. By logic, it should be a big margin. I mean, but it's not going to be a big margin, but it'll be a small margin, precisely because it's Trump, and therefore there'll be people hesitating.
Also, again, I'm going to give a window of 72 hours. Let the Arizonas of the world count. One ballot at a time. If Trump loses, the MAGA movement's dead. It's gone.
Yeah, I think so. I agree. There's also the other aspect of it. Obviously we can talk about the MAGA movement. There's also a personal part to it. You remember, 26th of November is the sentencing date for his New York state case. If he's lost, the judge will probably, he's not going to hesitate in doling out serious punishment. I mean, he may well send him to prison. I don't know if he will, but it's quite a possibility that he will send him to prison. Maybe not a long prison term, but a prison term. And then you've got all these other prosecutions in the pipeline. I don't think either Biden, the last few days of Biden, or President Harris, they're not going to give him a pardon. Or at least they're going to let this process, go through. Have him put him on trial and all that. But there's not going to be any kind of a preemptive pardon.
But how is his movement going to react to that?
Not well. But they don't care about that. I mean, I don't think they care.
Yeah, I mean, I game played it in my head today. I think that if Trump in the end succeeds, then we're in a very dangerous, unstable, unclear environment. If Harris prevails, then the powers of the state will be able to isolate and snuff out any meaningful.
Right, I think so. I think so. No, I mean, I agree. I think that would be the end of the MAGA movement.
And it was just about Trump.
Well, no, I think I'm
teasing you here. I'm prodding you here. What do you think?
Sorry, say that again. What did you say?
I'm just prodding you.
Your question before that. You asked me.
No, but I'm saying then it was just about. But then MAGA was just about Trump.
Oh, well, that's a very good question, because there is obviously a kind of a right-wing populist movement in the world at the moment, and that's kind of an interesting issue again, because I think Trump has stimulated these various movements in Europe. Whether it's Orban in Hungary, whether it's the Alternative for Deutschland in Germany, you got in France. What impact will a defeat for Trump have on those movements? Because then they'll also say, well, it's quite hopeless. I mean, it's the powers that be will always prevail. They will always defeat us. We have to go back to the same thing as we've always done, the sort of the center right, whether the Bush McCain thing in America, the Jacques Chirac, figures in Europe. I mean, Orban has been riding high for some time because of his association with Trump. I mean, I think he's a very clever guy, and the fact that Hungary is punching above its weight is the connection with Trump. I mean, he's a close friend of the American president. You can't mess with him. If Trump goes down, then I think he also will be a much diminished figure in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm not a Trump booster. I've said this 1,000 times here, but I don't want to see a one-party state.
I don't want to. No, to be honest, yeah, go.
But see, that's what I find. I'm going to try to take the personality out of it here. I think there should be a resistance movement because the country and the Western world is on the wrong track. And voters are telling us this, but it doesn't always translate in electoral results.
But my view is that whatever Trump's weaknesses, and we know what they are. I mean, so no point in listing them. I just don't think there's any contest. I mean, it's Trump versus Harris, just no contest. Trump versus somebody else, maybe Trump versus DeSantis, we can argue about what's better. Trump versus Harris is just no contest. We know a Harris presidency will be disastrous. I think disastrous internationally. I think it'll be disastrous domestically. I think it'll be a complete kind of cultural revolution that will sweep America.
So the Labor has this overwhelming victory, and look where he is right now. That's going to be Kamala Harris in February.
Oh yeah, no question. But she will pursue that agenda, the same agenda that I think Biden wanted to pursue, but he had difficulties. He didn't really have much of a mandate, didn't have any kind of a majority. But they're going to push for this. They're going to push to make Puerto Rico a DC states of the United States. They're going to back the Supreme Court. They're going to get rid of the filibuster in the Senate. They're going to go for an amnesty. They're going to try and amnesty who knows how many millions and millions of illegals in the United States, because that's a Democratic voting bloc. They're going to try all that. I'm not saying they're going to succeed, but without question, Harris will try that. And they're going to, I think, dismantle American history. I think they're going to try kind of a Mao's cultural revolution about America. The way Obama tried to do. Essentially, America's built on built on slavery and racism and evil and so on. I mean, that's going to be the agenda. I mean, it'll be the sort of the kind of Obama Susan Rice agenda that she will try to enact. So that's why.
All right. Two things. I'm going to have to maybe I'll eat crow because I said a week or 2 weeks ago that Barack Obama had lost his Midas touch. Maybe I'm wrong. If Harris succeeds, then Obama is still the kingmaker, right. And he can make a case for that. George, question to you. Did Kamala Harris sufficiently differentiate herself from Joe Biden? Because it looks like a little sleight of hand here.
To be honest, I don't see it. I mean, she was droning on this weekend about how she's going to work like she's never worked before for a peace in the Middle East.
Has she ever worked in her whole life? We know she didn't work at McDonald's.
But that's a very interesting, and I was thinking just about what you just said. Again, another difference between Trump and Biden and Harris. I mean, both Biden and Harris have spent their entire lives on the government payroll. That's that. Therefore, that's entirely their mentality. It's essentially a parasitical class. I mean, they're basically, living off the work of others. I mean, again, whatever else you can say about Trump, Trump was actually very successful in the private sector. So he has at least an understanding of life outside of government. But Harris's entire life has been in government. Biden's entire life has been in government. And that's why their mentality is, it's the role of government to mold the people, to create a new people. The government knows better than the people what's good for them. I think that's her mentality. There you go.
Well, it kind of dovetail that. They're professional liars too, and the media covered for them. Right before we started, you caught me listening to Glenn Greenwald, and he was playing a tape from Morning Joe, and it was just this spewing the most vile lies that are easily checked. Okay, and that's what we got for the entire elections. Bloodbath, remember that one? Okay, I mean, these people are just they have no shame whatsoever. But much of this media, again, I'm trying to critique here. Much of this media is generated for those that want to consume it.
Yes.
Okay?
Yep. Yep.
And again, I mean, how can you have a vibrant, healthy political culture when you will actively go to watch a broadcast that will repeat lies that are lies, but make you feel good? How can you have a political culture moving forward? Because you can't. Okay, and if the majority, and that means 50% plus one vote, has the final say on who's garbage in the country, how can you move forward from there?
You absolutely can't. And it's very interesting when you talk about these professional liars, is that Barack Obama was campaigning for Harris, I think, yesterday, and he trotted out again the lie that Trump said that they're good on both sides. I mean, this is a lie that's even Snopes, that kind of liberal fact-checking service, has said it's a lie. He actually said
it was debunked within a day of saying it.
He said he was actually opposite. He said openly it doesn't apply to the fascists. But Obama, and remember in 2020 when he was campaigning for Biden, remember there was the lie then was that Russia had put bounties on the heads of American servicemen in Afghanistan, and that Trump was okay with it. Trump had no problem with it. And Obama was trotted this out. He was repeating this out there. How can you have, this is, you've never had an ex-president who has so disgraced himself by becoming such a narrow, nasty, lying partisan in the way that Obama has. I mean, every other president.
It's a good business model, George. It's a good business model, though.
It's a very good business model. He's a very, very wealthy man, enjoys this huge reputation. But what you said is interesting about the Midas touch, because of course, if he fails and Harris doesn't succeed, then I think he will be thoroughly discredited, because he came out and attacked the brothers. He came out and attacked the brothers. They said, hey, the brothers are not showing up for Kamala. Right. What's the matter with it?
Everybody, do a fact check for us here. But during the entire 8 years of the Obama presidency, I don't think he ever said the brothers.
I don't think so either.
I don't think so. I mean, he's half black, brought up by white women. Okay. White women. That's right. White women don't talk about the brothers.
That's right. That's right. Yes. Yeah. No, exactly. He's that's right. He was brought up by white women, spent his life among white women, and then he moved to Indonesia. He sort of never really encountered any kind of African Americans until he was about 18 or 19 when he actually moved to the continental United States. Up until then, he had never encountered any African Americans, because he's not an African American. I mean, that was just not him.
white, half black.
Exactly. But it's very interesting that he peddles this stuff, and it's very odd why he does this. I mean, I think it's that he somehow wants to. I think he wants to continue to be president. He has to somehow to be a kind of a surreptitious president, because why would any ex-president get so involved in day-to-day life? On the contrary, you're saying, hey, well, I won my elections comfortably. What do I care if my successors are unable to win? I won. So
how many ex-presidents get to say they're in their sixth term?
You're right.
Huh?
That's right. Right.
Huh? It's yeah. Yeah. I mean, okay, I was going to save this for later, but I don't want to forget. George and I were exchanging messages this afternoon. And I was thinking about the Victoria Nuland out of the blue on Rachel Maddow.
Yeah.
She was just in the scheduling that day, right, George?
Exactly. Yeah, suddenly shows up.
Just showed up.
Yeah.
It was a cold call, right?
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
Hey, Victoria Nuland's out in the green room. Oh, all right, bring her out. Okay. And Liz Cheney. And I said to George, I'm going to I'll get the story straight, and you'll put the punchline in. I said, what was it? Victoria Nuland for National Security Advisor. And then George wrote back and he said, no, Secretary of State for Victoria Nuland, and for Liz Cheney, National Security Council Advisor. You heard it here. You heard it.
I think so. I really do think that that's the way it's going to be. I think Nuland will be the Secretary of State. I just don't. I don't see anyone else.
Why did she make that appearance, George?
That's right. Exactly. It made that appearance. Now, I think it was. She's planning color revolution here in case that's necessary. In case of a Trump win. And remember, what was very striking about that, and we talked about it yesterday, what was striking is her Cheshire Cat smile. She seems so pleased. She seems so satisfied. And you think, what's she so pleased about? Why, why, you always get, when someone you don't like seems very pleased with herself, you start getting very uncomfortable. She knows something that the rest of us don't. What is it that she knows? I think clearly she's plotting something. I mean, there's her sudden. She's a foreign policy person. She's not a domestic affairs person. Why is she suddenly talking about domestic affairs? So that was quite creepy. But I think in a Harris administration, she will be Secretary of State. Liz Cheney will be National Security Advisor, and that of course raises a very interesting issue, because essentially the Cheneys will be back. Essentially, the Cheneys will have been rehabilitated. Which means George W. Bush will be rehabilitated. The neocons will be rehabilitated, because then you got Robert Kagan. He's obviously going to be playing a major role in the administration. All of the Iraq War alumni will be back. David Frum will be back. Jeffrey Goldberg will be back. All of them will be within the orbit of Kamala Harris, and that will be very interesting. So the Democrats, who kind of went on and on about George W. Bush 20 years ago. Oh, Bush, Cheney, and now they've brought them all back, which just shows you how dishonest and dishonorable and disgusting the Democrats were. It was all just about personalities with them, or political power. How do we get political power? There was never anything wrong with the Iraq War or anything less. How do we get back to power?
I have this image in my mind. Kamala Harris's inauguration, the Supreme Court Chief Supreme Court Justice, he'll be given the day off. Who will be holding the Bible? It'll be George W. Bush. Okay.
That's right. Yeah, but
it's really interesting is that absolute failure doesn't mean you can't move forward, because you have a catastrophic foreign policy in both parties. But what you have is a section. The neocons are notoriously associated previously with the Republican Party. They have completely invaded and absorbed the Democratic Party. Okay, right. They don't need the Republican. They don't need the Republican Party anymore, and because we've seen this tendency since the end of the Cold War, and now it's coming to fruition. Is that it's this election was about a victory for the national security state. That is the real winner in this election. Okay.
No, yeah, that's right. That's right. And you're absolutely right. I mean, the neocons, they kind of took over the Republican Party, so they pushed aside the the more of a kind of what used to be known as the sort of Main Street Republicans tended to be kind of skeptical about foreign
country club Republicans.
Exactly. They didn't want to decide. Well, like
the Christians, the James Bakers.
That's right. And embodied by, say, Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was basically, yes, Cold Warrior and so on, but essentially quite skeptical about extensive American foreign commitments and getting involved in pointless wars. Nixon, Eisenhower, that used to be the kind of mainstream of Republican politics. But the neocons moved in, took this over, and then moved it in a horrific direction, which came to fruition in the Iraqi invasion. Now, once the Republicans, turned against them, through Trump, they kind of, snuck into the Democrats, who were eager to embrace them. And, there they are. They're on MSNBC. They're on CNN, constantly denouncing, oh, Trump, Trump, Trump. And now, and they will be back. And the Democrats will say, yeah, great. Hey, this is our team. We've got this great team. Hey, this is the Iraq War alumni.
And even if we look at the Senate and House elections, if the Republicans do well in the Senate, because that was kind of the feeling in the last day or so, a good percentage of Republican senators will be pro-Harris.
Yeah. No, on foreign policy, I think she will have no problems at all. I think domestically, I think you tried tampering with abortion, and I agree with you. I think abortion, it's just as useful as a wedge issue. You kind of every 2 years you bring up abortion.
George, I'll show you the level of disgust I have. Is that here you have a Democratic Party that they're interested in two issues. They're interested in genocide and they're interested in abortion. It's a party of death, is what it is. Okay, it's really disgusting. Okay, and George, we need to reiterate, they will not resolve it because this is their ultimate wedge issue. Okay, and it distorts a lot. Okay,
that's right. Exactly. No, that's right. But what's also interesting, and it shows how deeply dishonest the Democrats were, because back in the day, back in the sort of 70s, the pro-abortion crowd, they said, yeah, we support abortion because this is, it's a woman's right, let's say, young women, they're sexually active, should have this as a right. They don't say that anymore. Then they used to go on about choice. It's about choice, freedom of choice, and then we have this sort of like with Waltz saying about, well, government, hey, none of your goddamn business, it's all a matter of choice. But they don't even say that now. Now it's all about women's health. Women are unable to get reproductive health. There's no reproductive care to suggest that somehow, women want to get pregnant, they want to have children, and they're not able to get reproductive care. It's a total lie. But they're going, women are somehow bleeding to death in parking lots because they can't get reproductive care. It's a total lie. But it just shows how then they don't dare to bring up just abortion, because then people think, hey, that's not very nice. Are you really advocating for abortion? No. We want reproductive care. It's like, because women are bleeding to death in parking lots.
How can you have reproductive care if the result is death?
Exactly. That's the lie. That's the lie. And it's just like, when Harris says, well, I want to make Roe v. Wade. I support Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade. And then when somebody says to her, yeah, but Roe v. Wade, that put in severe restrictions on abortion, the 3 trimester divisions. Is that what you want? Well, she never answers that question, because then you have to say that there's a point at which you have to outlaw abortion. She's not going to do that. But it's good to keep saying Roe v. Wade, Roe v. Wade, Roe v. Wade.
George and I remember when it came into effect. Okay, we know so much more of the science than we did then. Okay,
Right.
and even supporters of smart people that know about the issue take pause in many respects, and how Roe versus Wade should be implemented as the law of the land. Even they question it because we know so much more than we did then. But I mean, again, it's just a wedge issue, okay, and it produces results for them, and
Yes.
and that just shows, and the Republican Party hasn't totally resolved it, okay.
No.
They just let the states take care. Which that's my position, and that's George's position. I think, okay. I think.
Well,
that's
I think it's my position. I mean, look, you can have your own views on it. Whether you think this is a terrible issue. A terrible thing to do, abortion. But you can also say that, look, I don't think this is a matter for federal legislation. And it certainly isn't something a president, it's not within the power of a president to do anything about. And so that's why, I think Trump's position is just simply, look, I did what I said I would do. I brought on Supreme Court justices. They've overturned it. Republicans have been, campaigning against Roe v. Wade for 50 years. I did it, and now I'm done. Why you keep ramming this down my throat? And I think that's a reasonable position to take. But Democrats see this as a wedge issue. But again, and I think this is what I was saying earlier, is that those who really feel strongly about it, those for whom this is abortion, is Harris gaining any votes? In other words, the people who are already very agitated they're already Democratic Party voters. So is she winning additional votes?
But that goes back to my tribe thing. Okay, it's a tribal issue, and again, every election season, there's the soccer moms or the beer dads or whatever, but a lot of focus has been on independent women, and they gravitate toward that. George, let me just ask you like a very broad question. Did Trump run a good campaign?
I don't think he ran. I mean, with Trump, you never really get a good campaign. You never get a disciplined campaign. You always want you've got the issues are in your favor, so why can't you just be more disciplined? But then it's like asking a dog to be something,
telling Buddy what to do.
But because when you look at this campaign, the issues all favor Trump. I mean, if you look at the economy, clearly people are dissatisfied with the state of the economy. So that is a negative for the incumbent. Immigration, clearly people are very worried about immigration. That favors Trump. Crime, people are worried about crime, favors Trump. Foreign policy hasn't played much of a role, but again, clearly Biden and Harris cannot exactly tout a successful foreign policy. I mean, the idea, well, we kept NATO together. Well, Americans say, oh, well, thank God, Biden kept NATO together. I mean, so the issues favor Trump, and and that's why really nothing has worked for the Democrats other than this personal attack on
exactly. Trump. But you keep saying it favors Trump. It doesn't favor Trump. I mean, you're saying his position. Yes, his position, but as a politician, it doesn't favor him. And if he loses, then we have to call balls and strikes here. Is that the left, the Democrat, the machine, effectively use their Trump card because they know people will come out and vote because Trump is on the ballot. They win.
Right. Yeah, no, that's right, and I think that's but when you go through them and say, well, where the Democrats really don't have any kind of a record to run on. We go through, we've just gone through a number of things, and then on none of them are the Democrats doing well. So ultimately, they have one thing going for them, which is that Trump is a controversial figure. I mean, he arouses intense emotions. But maybe, and this is where we get to the issue of the one-party state. Maybe any Republican, they would do the same thing to any Republican. I mean, Trump just provides more targets. It's a a target-rich environment. There's so many things that you can go after him on. But had it been, let's say it's J.D. Vance or Ron DeSantis, they would have attacked him. They would have after J.D. Vance with a vengeance, or all the various things. So it would have been a little harder, but they would have done exactly the same thing. They went after Mitt Romney, the completely useless, complete vacuous figure, Mitt Romney. They did that with him. So that's basically the Democrats' playbook, and they play it well. They're very, very good at this kind of politics.
Well, another message I sent to George today was, if Trump fails, we may never see another Republican in the White House again. I think that's possible, unless we have a complete reinvention of the political system and the parties themselves. May have the name Republican, but won't be the party that we know now. I don't know where the country goes after this, George, because, again, I think 2016 is going to be thought about for a long, long time, because that was the hope and change. Right. That was the real hope and change.
Right.
Right. And where's the hope and change now?
No,
if you can't communicate with half the country, and I think that's exactly what's happened here. I mean, 70+% are dissatisfied with the direction of the country. Then why are you voting for these people? I mean, I need an explanation. Okay, and then that the other half is going to say, we can't win. What's the whole point now? Okay, I think it's a really, really bad situation to be in, because you're going to get and people that are voting for Trump, they're the most disaffected, poorest people. Their prospects are bleak. We've had over the course of from the 70s all the way to the present, the underclass was absolutely decimated, and then Clinton came in and the middle class was starting to be decimated. Right. And now we have the upper middle class that is pressure on them. I mean, you've squeezed everything out. Okay.
Right.
You need to have social power. You need assets. You need wealth. You need to be able to have skin in the game. But if all of that is taken squeezed out of you, then you're absolutely defenseless. There's nothing you can do, and then you can just do this culture war stuff until you're blue in the face. But it's not going to change your socioeconomic.
No, I think that's right, and I think that's where you have this clear failure on the part of the political ruling class. I mean, you have the Iraq War debacle, then you have the 2008 crash. Then you have essentially when the response to 2008 was essentially Obama, who turned out to be a complete dud, didn't do anything, any of the things that people expected from him. Then they went for Trump, kind of the opposite of Obama. Then you sabotage Trump by cooking up this, the Russiagate stuff. And then, and then becomes same old under Biden, going back to some decrepit figure from a quarter of a century ago. So it does go to the question, like, well, what do we do now? If the public will decide to go for Harris, then I think it's completely hopeless. And then I think it's it'll be a civilizational choice. I mean, this is where you're going. This is where America is. And then America is the America of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I mean, of Kamala Harris or Barack Obama. That's going to be America. It's not the America that we once remembered. That's gone. The Americans will have made that choice. So this is what we want. Now, going back to your question about 2016, I mean, what Trump did is like he did kind of offer an alternative, and he did make that breakthrough, the blue wall. It's ultimately that's still that incredible performance in 2016 when he went into that. He went into the Rust Belt, which it seemed like Republicans will never win that back, and he won that back, and and then we're gonna have to see whether he's
Hey.
So
see, that's what happens when you put a Republican Chihuahua and a Democrat Chihuahua.
All right, exactly. They're getting very excited. They're not going to wait till tomorrow. I mean, we can't wait till the election results tomorrow. We got to sort this out.
I think I heard George is right. No, Peter's right. No, George.
I got it. But by the way, going back to the how we look at these results. I mean, why I'm still putting, betting to what extent the betting on a Trump.
And I'm
you're agnostic. You're agnostic.
I think Harris has the advantage, so that we got
okay,
it out.
Well, all right. Yeah, I'm looking at the poll numbers, and I'm looking at the early voting. I'm also looking at the issues, and so that's why I think that all of that favors Trump. But there's the other side of it, which is the Trump's personality, the fact that he arouses such intense dislike, and he has a problem with women, as Republicans generally have problems.
Well, I mean,
with women, but I still think that he's going to pull this off.
Megyn Kelly came out with a blistering criticism of the Madison Square Garden event, which, to be honest with you, I only saw snippets of it. I didn't see the whole thing. What did she call it? She called it brotastic. Okay, it was. It's really interesting. I mean, I used to be a big fan of Jordan Peterson, and no longer. That's no longer the case. But I mean, this campaign really did kind of empower young men in a lot of ways. I mean, the messaging of it all, which I think was very positive. Okay, I think it was actually quite healthy. Okay, they can participate just like everybody else. But I can see the critique. I can see the critique that because if it's one big bromance, it's at the expense of women, and I think that they should have been a little bit more cognitive of that fact.
Again, Megyn Kelly is,
no, she's not my first person to go to. I just thought it was an interesting comment.
No, no, all right, but you still have to go back to the Megyn Kelly of 2015 when she she threw that first question at Trump. Essentially, the goal was to destroy Trump there and then. This was the first debate. And the goal was to do Trump in once and for all, in that opening debate. And then she asked that question about you have called, women dogs, pigs, disgusting animals. And then he said, only Rosie O'Donnell. And then that was it. And from that moment on, he kind of never looked back.
George, answer the question. What, I mean, it was, I mean, it for a Republican Party, see, Georgia and I have the advantage of the long memory, and what we saw at Madison Square Garden was not your father's Republican Party. Okay, it certainly wasn't my father's. Okay, right. I mean, times change and things like that, but I mean, messaging, is also very important. Again, I don't want to contradict myself here, but I mean, if so many people, in some cases, like over 40% of people already had voted way before that event, then does it really matter? Okay. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, but it's a little harsh. I mean, on this Madison Square Garden, because I mean, who took part in that? I mean, you had Bobby Kennedy, you had Elon Musk. I mean, you had Tulsi Gabbard. You had Vivek Ramaswamy. You had that guy Byron Donalds, and the congressman from Florida. So, I mean, it's pretty much an all-star of Republicans. I mean, you can't just simply say, oh, well, because we had that comedian. I mean, that was certainly a very bad decision to have that comedian whose specialty is insult. I mean, he's an insult comedian. I mean,
Rodney Dangerfield, everybody, Don
right.
Rickles, everybody. It's
Yeah.
a tradition in humor.
That's right, exactly. But if you're having a political rally, it probably isn't a great idea. Who's somebody who's going to start riffing about Jews and blacks and so on. You remember Jackie Mason? Remember that comedian, kind of that Jewish comedian from New York? And I kind of, people rather liked him. I liked him, but Rudy Giuliani, I think in 1993, I think he said, "Hey, he's going to be my sidekick." So he went around with Jackie Mason, and of course, Jackie Mason then referred to David Dinkins, who was his opponent. He called him a Schwarzer. And of course, now you can't really call a black man a Schwarzer, but that's what Jackie Mason's humor is. I call black Schwarzer, and of course that was an embarrassment. And then Giuliani had to basically give him the boot. But that's just, you don't want to associate yourself with comedians. I mean, they're not good news. I mean, they think in a very different way. But this guy is not just an insult comedian, he's a roast comedian. He does these roasts, which I don't really find roasts terribly funny. I think that cringe making, they're so nasty about whoever they're roasting.
Well, Don Rickles, he was the king. He was the king.
Well, he was good. He was good at it. But you have to be the victim of a roast, you really have to have a thick skin. I mean, not everybody has a thick skin. So
I remember when Don Rickles roasted Ronald Reagan.
Yes.
And Ronald Reagan was in stitches. He was laughing along. Okay,
right.
That's what makes an insult a good insult comedian, when the victim is laughing along with you. And Don Rickles had a heart of gold, and everybody knew it. Okay, he was a wonderful person.
Yeah, no, but I remember watching. I think Ann Coulter was being roasted. I can't remember who the comedian was who was roasting her. And boy, that was nasty. And she looked completely unamused. You just watch her face.
That's Ann. That's Ann for you.
Yeah, that's right. So, if you're roasting someone, and the person is just looking stony faced, then that's not.
George, what was disgusting was Rudy Giuliani. That was pure, vile. It hurt. It hurt on every single level. It was painful listening to his rant. Okay, when I was listening to him, I didn't feel bad that he lost all his wealth. Okay, his 2 apartments. They even took his Rolex watch away from him. Too bad, Rudy. Okay. Well, you know what he's doing, everybody? MEK. He works for this dissident group fighting against Iran. He's paid handsomely. He needs the money. Okay,
he does need the money. Definitely needs the money. It's kind of an interesting thing with but I mean, Giuliani kind of identified himself with the Israeli issue. I mean, he always, to a certain extent, he did that when he was mayor. Obviously, he's New York City. That's an important constituency. But it was even after that, he completely identified himself with the cause of Israel when he ran for president disastrously in 2008. But since then, he's just been completely a shill for Israel. And he wasn't really like that early on in his career, when he was a prosecutor, and he went after Michael Milken. He went after all these horrible, evil Wall Street characters, and at the time, people even accused Giuliani of being anti-Semitic. You're anti-Semitic. You're going after all these Wall Street figures, all of whom were Jewish. So he's anti-Semitic. Milken is Jewish. He's going after Michael Milken. So at that time, Giuliani was still kind of a reasonable figure, but now, very much a shadow of who he was.
You do remember? I think we messaged back and forth. He was on Laura Ingraham one night, pretty sauced up.
He was hammered.
He was hammered. I think you said that was Giuliani after 5 scotches.
Yeah, it looked like it. Yeah.
Remember, you really want to be saying that, Rudy?
Yeah, it's very. I wonder what I mean. It's interesting what happens when you invite someone on on the show, and he arrives and he's hammered. Do you cancel? I mean, you can't really cancel Giuliani.
Well,
Was
it
still quite an
happened to
important
me.
figure.
The very famous British journalist Robert Fisk, who died a few years ago. What was it? The War on Civilization. His tome that was like that thick.
I think was it. I think it was more like The Pity of War or something like.
No. You're thinking of a different. That's Niall Ferguson.
No. I am thinking of Fisk, but I think the word pity was in it, but.
Okay. Anyway, but it's a huge tome, and he was one of the greatest Western journalists in the Greater Middle East. I mean, it's really good. But we invited him on the program, and he was loaded. Really, and it was Robert Fisk. I've been waiting for a long time to have him on. I mean, he was a big catch for us, and just what do you do? And we just let it go. And just when he sat down, he said, before we started recording, he said, "Can I get some coffee, please?" And I was looking at him. I said, "Do you see what I see?" Yeah. Too many drinks after lunch. Okay. Other people that I know that knew him, unfortunately, said he had a problem with it. Yeah, what do you do? I mean, I've been waiting forever to have him on my program, and then he really hurt himself. He was not coherent. Let's put it that way.
Right. But it's a very much I mean, with British journalists, it's an ongoing issue. And in particular, these British journalists, they get hammered, but they're able to be quite productive. I mean, I envy the talent of drinking to great excess, but still managing to produce something. I mean, Christopher Hitchens, the late Christopher Hitchens, used to get hammered all the time, but he still managed to churn out a kind of a regular spate of articles, and and there are others. I always envied that talent, that you get hammered and you're still able to produce. And I guess Robert Fisk had that ability. And and other people I've known in Britain, not only they get hammered, but they go to sleep, they sleep for 3 hours, and then they wake up still hammered, and then they start writing, and that's a particular British talent. Anyway, some of the.
I wanted to ask you before because I don't want to forget. What happens to J.D. Vance if Trump loses?
I don't think it's going to hurt him too much. I don't
think so either.
I mean, he's got 4 years ahead of his term in Ohio still to go, and I think he will be obviously a front runner for one of the front runners for the nomination in 4 years' time. So I don't think it'll hurt him. What stance he'll take, whether he's going to modify MAGA, that I'm not sure about. But I think he will start probably in some ways distancing himself from Trump, at least the Trump personality, not so much the Trump issues. But
well, I mean, okay, that's kind of a tripwire there. What does Trump do afterwards if he loses?
Well, I think first of all, he's got to ensure that he stays out of prison. I mean, he's got all these legal cases to deal with. I mean, that's a lot of legal cases. I mean, he's got the criminal cases. He's got to stay out of prison first of all in November the 26th with the New York case, but he's still got those 2 federal cases, then plus a case in Georgia to deal with. Then he also has that huge civil lawsuit filed by Big Tish James, so he has to deal with that. So he's going to have his work cut out, because he's not going to get a pardon from Biden or Harris anytime soon, if ever. So that's a serious issue for him. I mean, he's approaching 80. I don't think he fancies spending the last years of his life in prison. And
everybody keep in mind, this is not going to be, let's let bygones be bygones. There's going to be a judge out there that's going to say, and the legacy of that judge will be, I put Trump in prison. It will be a coveted title.
Yes, a coveted title. Yeah, absolutely. This guy in New York, I think he would love to have that coveted title, and particularly if he loses, the election, he will be damaged goods, and therefore will be quite vulnerable to be, whacked over the head by this judge in New York, because hey, he no longer has the aura of somebody who is still heading towards the White House. He will be damaged goods. He will be somebody who's a loser. What do you do to a loser? You kick him. That's it. Always kick a man when he's down. And that, I think if he loses, I think he's going to be very vulnerable to the sentencing on November the 26th. Anyway, got a few points here on the on our locals board. We got Judy Hotchkiss. Always very good to see you, Judy. Thank you so much. Thank you for your generosity. And Judy says, those who wax eloquent about threats to our democracy are really worried about the threats to our bureaucracy. That's apparently a quote from Vivek Ramaswamy. That's well put. I think that's well
very
put.
Good. I think he adds a very valuable voice to the conversation. I just don't like him.
I know what you mean.
I'm the smartest guy in the classroom.
Yeah.
I just don't. It just rubs me the wrong way.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. It's like people you knew. I knew people like that at school. I knew people like that at college. They had a kind of glibness, and in one sense, you envy them because they're able to be so glib. They're able to be so eloquent at a moment's notice. There's never any pause, never any hesitation. But yeah, that's right. But on the other hand, I've never found that there's anything that he's said that I've had any objection to. So it's more his, something about his personality or his character that is a little hard to take. But never, it's like this quote: those who talk about the threats to our democracy, they really talk about threats to our bureaucracy. I think, that's very well put. I can't,
that reminds me that I was in graduate school. I was participating in what was called the Berkeley Stanford Russian Behavior Program. Okay, behavior, behave yourself. Okay, and there was, I'm not going to mention his name because I still know him, but it would go on for like 90 minutes, and there would be this sometimes kind of a shallow debate, and obviously some people showing what historical knowledge they had or didn't have, kind of embarrassed themselves. But this one person I'm thinking right now, he would kind of wait to the last 10 or 15 minutes, and he would just say, well, can I sum up here if I understand? And he would do it in the most amazing way. And, very, very quiet, very, very modest, never, hey, look at me, because everybody else wanted, because they wanted that State Department internship, and they wanted that scholarship. And the professors that were part of that, they had all of the levers. Okay, I know the guy that got it was the person I'm talking about. Right. They were throwing things at him. Okay, and he was the opposite of Vivek. Okay,
right. No, I think so, and I think that it's very, very interesting. Even that phrase, "the threats to our democracy," there's something really phony, fake, and phony about that. It's like when the pollsters are saying, "Well, what are the issues that are really worrying electors?" And say, well, democracy is on the ballot. What does that even mean? How is democracy on the ballot? Well, of course, because Trump is a threat to our democracy. So it's already, you're already begging the question, because when we say democracy is on the ballot, well, Trump is a threat to our democracy. Therefore, what's on the ballot is to vote against Trump. But you've never explained in what sense is Trump a threat to our democracy. But, that's already self-evident the moment you say democracy is on the ballot.
Yeah, well, and particularly since Kamala Harris has only been on the ballot for about 15 minutes.
Well, yeah, exactly. Anyway, Steve K9 says, we demand the right to murder our babies. Yes. Why? Cyndi Lauper said it best. Girls just want to have fun. All right. Yeah, I think that's but as I say, when you say the Cyndi Lauper, girls just want to have fun, that used to be the argument in favor of abortion. Hey, girls just want to have fun. Well, boom, boom. Why should girls have to pay pay this heavy penalty for the rest of their lives, just for one night of fun? And that used to be the argument in favor of abortion. It's changed when we get these gruesome stories about, women bleeding to death in parking lots and women carrying stillborn babies and, unable to do anything about it. They can't get reproductive care. Hospitals are turning women away. that it's a very bizarre transformation, and I think it is because the public has changed, the public mood has changed on abortion, and therefore you have to present it in this very lurid way, rather than say girls just want to have fun, because I think no one's really buying that argument anymore.
Yeah, but I mean, the abortion issue is a way to identify your enemy. It had nothing to do with children. Okay, it's a way to identify your enemy. Okay, it's a way to divide people. That's why it will never be resolved, because it's such a convenient tool. Okay, it's not about life anymore. Right. It's about it's a political wedge. That's all.
Right. That's right. That's exactly right. And then Judy says, COVID redefined healthcare. Yes, now trans operations, teenage hormone injections, and abortions are in the same category as mandated vaccines. It's all part of caring for the population. I think so. I think that's that's right. It's a very interesting transformation of of this healthcare, where you make vaccines, making vaccines mandatory. I mean, forcing people to inject themselves with chemicals that have never been tested, and that's regarded as healthcare, and then essentially people paying a severe price if they.
I have to say that for all people that have questions about COVID, please go to the CDC. They have a website, and they have a lot of observations and advice for everyday citizens and how to attend to their health care needs. Just needed to say that, everybody.
That's right. Well, thank you for that.
I had to say that.
I know. Thank you for that public service message. But again, what's really creepy, when you talk about the trans operations and teenage hormone injections, is that it's based on no science at all. None. I mean, none. The whole idea of battening onto children, undermining authority of parents, seizing on children, whatever issues that they're going through, and then essentially doing life-altering surgery, life-altering injections on children is so horrific, as to be just mind-boggling. I mean, I read somewhere somebody was saying, one of the greatest shames in medicine was the practice of lobotomy. I mean, they lobotomize people. I mean, and relatively recently, they just performed this operation on adults. Lobotomy. This is even worse than lobotomy, because at least back then it was at least the justification, because hey, well, at least if you lobotomize them, they cease to be harmful. They cease to be able to do harm to themselves and to others, even though they become vegetables. But this, there's absolutely no need for this. And performing surgery, unnecessary surgery on children or teenagers who are just simply going through phases and are confused about all sorts of issues, as teenagers are wont to do. And this is life-altering. That's it. It's like lobotomy. You can't go back to it. This will become, like lobotomy, eventually the great shame of medical science, that they sanctioned this kind of practice and undermining the authority of parents.
Yeah. I mean, I when I was growing up, I never heard of anybody having these problems.
No, exactly, because I
had a very average upbringing. Okay, in a suburb of Denver, Colorado. I can't, even to this day, I don't know the terms. Okay, dysphoria, these kind of things.
Yeah, gender dysphoria, exactly. Gender dysphoria. With children. I mean, you're talking about children. I mean, at least if you can talk about grown-ups, then at least you can discuss, these situations. But when you're talking about children, you're talking about people who are not yet fully developed, just confused about many issues.
12-year-olds that still believe in magical thinking. They believe in unicorns. I mean,
right. That's right. That's right. And again, it's and I think that's a point that Judy's making, that the whole idea that this is medicine, what kind of medicine is this? And same thing with, calling abortion reproductive care. It's the very opposite of reproductive care. And so it is a way of redefining, healthcare and
the whole reproductive care issue. Its origins are eugenics. George and I have already talked about this, and it's still eugenics. It's still eugenics. Right. Okay,
that's
it
right.
is.
That's right. Anyway, Peter, do you have to go now, or do you
about 15 more minutes or so?
Okay, because I want to just talk a little bit about Moldova, because we talked yesterday at some length about Moldova, and we had the election in Moldova, and shock, horror, to the astonishment of the world, Maya Sandu, the World Bank economist, parachuted into Moldova, prevailed with 55% of the vote.
Shocker.
Yeah, that's right. It was a real shocker. But it was very odd that we heard yesterday that the population of Transnistria, the sort of the Russian population of Transnistria, wasn't able to vote. There were no polling stations made available to these.
And Moldova claims that Transnistria is part of its sovereign territory.
Yes, exactly. So there were no polling stations, and then they tried to this Russian population of Transnistria. They tried to enter Moldova proper in order to vote, but suddenly the bridge was damaged. The bridge had been sabotaged. They couldn't enter Moldova to vote. That's very strange. I couldn't figure out that one. But suddenly said, oh no, the bridge was sabotaged, and then of course you had the Moldovan diaspora in Russia, and again there just were only 2 polling stations open in Russia with 5,000 ballot papers each.
There are hundreds of thousands of Moldovans in Russia.
Yeah, very, very odd. I mean, that was a head scratcher, and so, but nonetheless, this didn't dampen the enthusiasm of those who are. Let's see if I can show these articles. The happy articles that appeared in the media today, rejoicing about you say Maya Sandu. Here we have this. Where is it?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, but I think that let me get this wrong one. I think this is a different one. This is the one. Yeah. So it says Maya Sandu wins second term in Moldovan election in rebuke to Kremlin. It's a rebuke. Incumbent wins presidential runoff with 97% of vote counted, defeating Russian leaning rival. And then, but there's never any mention in any of these articles about the problems that we talked about. Well, what about the people in Transnistria? What about the Moldovan diaspora in Russia? But they never really appeared.
Everybody, but the Moldovan diaspora in Europe got to vote.
They got to vote. Yeah, that's right. And it says there that in fact, if you look at this here in this Guardian article, early results indicated that the large Moldovan diaspora, accounting for about 20% of the electorate, had overwhelmingly voted for Sandu.
That's a lie.
Exactly.
Because the overwhelming number of people in the diaspora weren't allowed to vote.
Right. Exactly. And then this is a classic. In her victory speech, delivered after nearly all votes were tallied, Sandu said that she had listened to the voices of her supporters and those of her opponent, Stoyanoglu. She said that her primary goal for the coming years would be to serve as a president for all citizens.
No, she's going to be a president for Brussels and for Washington.
Exactly. Today, dear Moldovans, you have given a lesson in democracy worthy of being written in history books. Freedom, truth, and justice have prevailed. Now, we haven't even talked about the suppression of the media, all the, the which were Russian media. So they suppressed the media. They suppressed the opposition vote. And here they are celebrating. And then she says, well, I'm going to be a president for everybody. It's like, Kamala Harris. You first call your opponents fascists, and then you say, oh, I'm the candidate of unity. Anyway, it says, officials in the capital of Chisinau believe that Moscow invested approximately $100 million before the first vote and had reportedly smuggled in some of the funds by money mules detained by the police at the main airport while carrying bundles of 10,000 euros in cash. But, we've said this over and over again, where's the evidence for this? I mean, it's $100 million. That's a lot of money in a tiny country of Moldova. So where's your evidence for any of this?
Yeah, but George, okay, let's say it's all true. Mm-hmm. What does Russia get out of it? Moldova is not going to be a member of the EU anytime in our lifetime, if ever.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
All right. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, because there are no pro-Russia parties in Moldova. There are no pro-Russian politicians in Moldova.
That's right.
So why would they spend $100 million?
You're absolutely right, and I think that's the proof that I think this is a lie. That this is just a way. This is a wedge issue. It's a way of mobilizing, not so much supporters, but a way of mobilizing EU and NATO on her behalf.
Exactly.
So
what this
yeah.
This whole article is not a characterization of what happened in the election. It is a characterization of what the Guardian thinks Westerners want to hear.
That's right.
Because it's completely devoid to what happened on the ground.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. But what's also interesting is how journalism, this is an obvious point, but journalism has become just nothing more than a transmission belt for government propaganda. I mean, these reporters, they never ask for any proof for these claims, or if they ask, they're immediately told, well, this is highly classified. We can't possibly provide you with proof. And then that's the end of that. I mean, it's a little like whenever we've watched those State Department press briefings with Matt Lee from the Associated Press. Matt Lee would ask quite good questions from the State Department spokesman, who would be unable to answer any of Matt Lee's questions, but it was never reflected in any of Matt Lee's reports. So, yeah. You just ask questions. Then when they tell you we can't answer your questions, you just simply, okay, fine. That's that. Anyway,
okay, and this Nuland Shore guy. I mean, the Russians have disavowed him. I think he's persona non grata in Russia.
Yeah, I think so. Moldova, this Olga Roska, foreign policy advisor to Sandu. Moldova has had a monumental task before it, just 2 weeks to stop a sprawling, Kremlin-backed vote-buying scheme that proved effective in the twin vote of the 20th of October. And then still on Sunday, Sandu's national security advisor wrote on X that they were seeing massive interference by Russia in our electoral process, an effort with high potential to distort the outcome. And cybersecurity agency reports the Central Election Commission voter education site was temporarily down this morning due to a DDoS attack.
Okay, but let's look. Okay, let's look at what we know. Mm-hmm. The election, the first round. Okay, their referendum for EU aspirations was what 51%.
50.5, yeah. It's not even 51. Yeah.
Okay. The real story here is not about interference, campaign interference. The real story here, it's obvious, voter suppression. There was voter suppression in the first round, and there was voter suppression in the second round.
Of course.
That's why, and they knew if they could suppress the vote, they would get the outcome that they wanted. That's the story here. It's nothing to do with Russia.
Exactly. It's voter suppression, and then they have to explain why is your election performance as abysmal as it is? So of course, you know, they say, oh yeah, because of Russia. Because how else do you explain the fact that you really haven't done terribly well, despite all the voter suppression?
Well, and of course they haven't used the term, but we will. Administrative resources. The state employed massive resources to get what they wanted. And if you want to look at electioneering and meddling, it's probably the state, not an outside power, that was doing it. They had resources.
Exactly. So here's another article in The Guardian. You know, The Guardian really went to town. Germany accuses Russia of massive effort to stop Moldovans abroad voting. Foreign Minister, that's our friend Annalena Baerbock, says bomb threats against polling stations in German cities show Putin will stop at nothing. Before I go on, I should mention that the Green parties of Europe have written jointly to Jill Stein, telling her to drop out in Michigan. So completely outrageous interference in the American election, but it's an interesting where the European Greens are, and you know what their priorities are. You know that they're so in bed with the Democrats in America.
Okay, let's read the subtitle. Okay, foreign minister says bomb threats against polling stations in German cities show Putin will stop at nothing. Well, so that's assuming you know how these people are going to vote. How do you know?
How do you exactly
vote?
That's right. Also, bomb threats are ridiculous. I mean, because it means there were no bombs, and also, where did the bomb threats come from? You know, did you actually check? I mean, is there any evidence that it had any connection with Russia? Whenever they say these things like, "Oh, bomb threats," they say, "Well, did you trace them? Did you trace the calls? And you know, like where did they come from?" They never report that. They just put in bomb threats and then leave the reader to put two and two together and come to their desired conclusion. So Germany has condemned what it called massive coordinated attempt to prevent Moldovans abroad from voting in the second round of the country's presidential election. And then Annalena Baerbock said vote buying, manipulation, and bomb threats against Moldovan polling stations, even in Germany, were aimed at the heart of European democracy and showed that the Russian President Vladimir Putin will stop at nothing.
Yeah, well, the heart of European democracy in this case is voter suppression. Good going.
That's right. Exactly, the voter suppression. And then a German foreign ministry spokesperson said polling stations in Hamburg, Frankfurt, Kaiserslautern, and Berlin had been targeted by bomb threats. There's a lot of bomb threats and not a single bomb.
Well, and there's a lot of polling stations in Germany, apparently, but not in Russia.
But only two in Russia. Describing the intimidation as totally unacceptable. But who was intimidated? It sounds like everyone voted normally. It doesn't sound like there was a lot of intimidation going on. The remarks came as Europe's most powerful leaders congratulated Moldova's pro-Western president Maya Sandu after she won a second term, cementing the country's EU aspirations and dealing a setback to the Kremlin. They completely made up, a totally made up story, dealing a setback to the Kremlin.
Well, what is Moldova going to get out of this? Okay. Can we count the ways? I'll let you go first, George, because I can't think of anything except for the NGOs and the foreign.
Right. The only thing they're going to get is they're going to come under pressure to be even more, key to NATO's plans. I mean, in other words,
Okay, you jumped ahead of us, but my point is that it's a very, very poor country. It's a very corrupt country. There are hundreds of thousands of its citizens working abroad because the country is dysfunctional itself, right. But they have aspirations. Well, you can't buy a cheeseburger at McDonald's with aspirations. Okay.
No. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's interesting. All of these articles we did yesterday and today, they never address what's going on in Moldova, do they?
No, never. never. Not anything like what are their problems or anything like that. It's always just Russia. But of course, that's the prize is Moldova as NATO infrastructure land. It's a crucial land bridge from Romania into Ukraine. That's what their interest in Moldova. There's no way in the world Moldova is going to enter the EU, but they want that piece of real estate, and they would like Moldova probably to change its constitution to allow it to become a NATO member state. But if that's not doable, then essentially it'll be de facto a NATO member state. So they'll just make use of Moldova as a transit route.
They already are.
Exactly, already are, but maybe even more so. But that's it. That's their only interest in.
Well, also we have to mention here is that again, the electorate is like out there somewhere. These kind of amorphous people, but it's clear if you look at other people, the way they reported on it in a more honest way, is that Ukraine weighs on the minds of a lot of people. They see what's going on there. They don't want it to happen to them. This also applies to Georgia. This is never mentioned. George and I know it's obvious that the whole goal is NATO membership, but it's never mentioned in these articles, is it?
No, never mentioned. And then again, we have this thing, and it says Moldovan authorities reported evidence of attempts to meddle in the electoral process before Sunday's vote, and then so on. Allegations of Russian or pro-Russia interference, including cyber attacks, bussing in voters, vote buying, and intimidation, underscored the stakes for the small former Soviet republic that has pursued a decisively pro-Western path under Sandu, seeking to join the EU. Now, everything that we have known about Russia, we know that the EU, they've never raised any problems about joining the EU. They never raised up any issue with Ukraine joining the EU. That was, and even they talked about this during the negotiations in Istanbul in 2022. They said, no NATO membership, but you can apply for the EU. So this is all made up that somehow Russia has any objections to EU membership. So but this is seeking to join the EU. Russia is so desperately against it. It's just not true.
But look, a good part of the disposable income for Moldovans comes from remittances from their brethren working in Russia. Okay, right. I mean, they want to forego that. Okay, I mean, Europe will the EU will pick up the slack for you. Or you really?
Right. No, that's right. Exactly.
Okay? I mean, and also Georgia is in the same position. I mean, there are a lot of Georgia. You can come across them just walking down the street. Right. Georgians living in Russia legally. Okay,
that's right.
They send remittances as well. Why? Because it's a little corrupt country, unfortunately. Okay, and so you want to cut off trade and people-to-people contact with Russia? Well, do that at your own peril. Okay, because you think the EU is going to step into the breach for you? Really?
Yeah. No, the question. You're not going to have. There aren't any jobs in the EU. The notion you're going to go to the EU and they're going to allow you to work anywhere in the EU, it ain't going to happen. First of all, there aren't any jobs in the EU. Second of all, the EU puts serious restrictions on who can enter the EU. They even with in terms of working there. I mean, even when Romania and Bulgaria they made it quite difficult for Romanians to just move in and start working in Germany. So Moldovans, the idea that somehow they're going to have these jobs open for them in Germany, it's a fantasy. And of course, again, as with Ukraine, you can't have a free trade agreement with Russia and have a free trade agreement with the EU. I mean, that's obviously that's a non-starter, because that means Russia would have a free trade agreement with the EU, and Russia isn't going to accept that. So you're going to have to then make a choice. And I think a free trade agreement with the EU hasn't really worked terribly well for Ukraine.
Yep.
So anyway, Moldova's foreign minister said on Sunday that polling stations again. Now we have Liverpool and Northampton had been targeted by false bomb threats. So there's a lot of bomb threats going on. But again, it's why is it Moldova's foreign ministry saying this? Has this been confirmed by the police in Liverpool and Northampton? Yeah. We got all these bomb threats
Well,
made.
George, you follow the British media better than I do. Did you see anything?
I haven't seen it. It's very strange. I mean, if you make bomb threats, then presumably the Liverpool police will be investigating these bomb threats. And then here we have, and then Ursula von der Leyen congratulated Sandu, saying it takes a rare kind of strength to overcome the challenges you faced in this election. I'm glad to continue working with you towards a European future for Moldova and its people.
Coming from a woman that was never elected to office.
Never elected to anything. And then in a joint statement, the Commission and the EU's top diplomat, Josep Borrell. How come? I thought he's gone.
I thought he was gone. Okay, he's like a cold you can't kick. Okay,
yeah, exactly. Praise the Moldovan authorities for the successful conduct of the election. Yes, you got the right outcome. It's a successful conduct of the election. We didn't have the embarrassment of being down 10 points throughout the night. It was successful. Despite unprecedented interference by Russia, including with vote buying schemes and disinformation.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, let's zoom out 30,000 feet up. Okay, this is a very bad outcome for this strategy that the EU and by extension NATO has had for both Moldova and Georgia. A lot of money, a lot of effort, a lot of strategies, and they're hitting brick walls. Okay. EU aspirations, well, okay, whatever that means. Okay,
exactly. But the EU is kind of still licking its wounds over the Georgia election. I mean, that's still, they still want to do something about that, but they have the so they're going to take this one and say, well, at least, hey, we got this. We won that. Well, you did it. We know. I mean, if somebody asks, well, in what way did you cheat? Well, you cheated by suppressing the vote. We know how you did it. In the case of Georgia, you still haven't been able to explain how was that victory by Georgia Dream in any way a fake, a fraud? How, provide us with some evidence that somehow Russia interfered and secured this election for Georgia Dream. You don't have the evidence.
Or maybe Georgia Dream just ran a good ground game.
Yeah,
I don't know. Because they learned the tricks that that these color revolutionary playbooks employ. Maybe they were able to counter them. Right. I mean, there's this, again, all of these articles never explain what is going on in these countries, okay?
No.
And there are a lot of people, again, the diaspora. Why do these two little countries have such large diasporas in Russia? It's for a reason, okay? It's not for the weather, I can guarantee you that.
That's a very interesting question. I mean, that you raised a very, very interesting question there. Why do they have such a large diaspora? And then, and that of course raises another question, which is the Baltic states, the Baltic Chihuahuas that we often talk about. They also have a huge diaspora. Why is it that so many of them leave and go and work somewhere else? Why do some of these Baltic Chihuahuas have such a high suicide rate? They have among the highest suicide rates in Europe. And why do those elites, the elites in those countries, why are they so inextricably tied towards Russia? That's how they make their money. They've been making their money for years in Russia. That little cutie, the new European, the Josep Borrell's successor, Kaja Kallas. She got into trouble, but she didn't get into that much trouble because everybody knew that the elite in Estonia had been basically making money off Russia since forever. Because since Soviet times, this was in Soviet times, the Soviets went out of their way to invest a huge amount into the Baltic states. I mean, after World War II, that's how they make their money. They can go on and on about Russia this, Russia that, but this is how they've been making money in years. That's what the Soviet system did. I mean, they poured in a lot of money in the Baltic states, just like they poured in a lot of money into Eastern Europe. not so much into Russia, but they went out of their way. And so all these little Baltic chihuahuas have been whining about Russia, even though this is how they make their money.
Yep. It's minerals, lumber. Lumber was big, really big. Okay.
Right.
I mean, I've flown across Russia. There's a lot of forests here, George. There's a lot of trees in this country. Okay. And then they would do the finished product and get like a 500% markup. I mean, that was the generosity of the Soviet Union to the Baltic republics. Okay, and then that 500% markup was sent for Western markets, not back to Russia. Okay, all right, George, it's going to wrap this up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So well, anyway, thank you very much, everybody who has joined us. Thank you so much for all of your questions, and thank you all of your comments. And we couldn't get to all of them, because there's so much to talk about. And we'll be back next Monday. We will have at least some idea of how this election.
If they're not still counting the votes.
Exactly. So see you, next Monday. And remember, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye-bye.